So whenever a major earthquake hits, a lot of scientific phrases tend to be thrown around, from those magnitude numbers to the Richter scale to things like seismic waves.
Right.
But what exactly does it all mean, especially for those of us who are not scientists? Next weather meteorologist Ahmed Badji, you are a scientist, so you're going to help kind of give us a refresher.
Of course, obviously, weather's the expertise in there, but when it comes down into a lot of these different aspects with it as well, meteorologists and geologists, a lot of us work really closely together, especially in the beginning of the programs, to get an understanding of how, the Earth itself and the atmosphere ends up interacting. So there's that background there that we have to look at. So at least the basic breakdown here for you. We're going to start off with the easiest part. That's the Richter scale, or the Richter magnitude scale. Let's start off with those numbers and really show you what we're breaking down along with that. So these are all the aftershocks just from the past few hours that we're actually looking at here in Turkey and in Syria. The issue here is actually, when we look at this a little closer, there was one just down to the southwest, actually over in the sea, that was red, and that means that it happened within the last hour, and it was just about a strength of about a 4.2. So an aftershock again continuing here, but you'll notice there are dozens of them just within the past 24 hours, 12 to 24 hours. There's really a very busy network that's been going on since this first one happened. And the first one, of course, you're looking at a 7.8, followed actually very quickly by a 7.6. All are quite strong on that scale. So let's try and break down the basics. And I mean the basics about these numbers. When we look at them, the magnitude of the earthquake, of course, you end up trying to go and put the similarities between, all right, what does it feel like? What is the damage from it? Is there damage? So many different things that go together. But it's not necessarily one size fits all for something like this, especially if you factor in places that are maybe built, like San Francisco, to actually sustain hits like this. A 4 to them seems, just like a regular day at the beach. But they start right here. You start off with about a 2. You usually can't feel that. They are plentiful. We have so many faults. We have so many plates around the globe that these happen all the time. But then you go up to a 3. Often felt, no damage really from that. Actually, back a little earlier, actually just a few years ago, 2013 into 2014, we had a minor shake here in Michigan. Some of you may remember that. You go up to 4, light, noticeable shaking. You can feel it. Again, still plentiful, but you're not actually really dealing with a whole lot right there off the bat. You're looking at a lot of aftershocks that end up hitting right around this mark, especially with what we've been seeing in Turkey just over the past few hours. A lot of them have been around a 4 and a 5, just by clicking around and trying to see what different types are happening there. Now then you get into a category called moderate, and that's magnitude 5 on the scale. That's when you start to get a little bit of light damage, especially if you're dealing with a spot that doesn't deal with the ground shaking that much. You get to a 6, and that has another category name that's strong. And you're starting to get, they're still fairly common, but not quite as common as other ones before that. You're starting to increase the rarity, especially as you get up that high. Usually a 6, I mean, that's some pretty good shaking that you're having to deal with, and you're going to get some cracks. Then you have to patch all that drywall all over again. But once we get past 6, jokes are over. That's where it's not funny anymore. Now you're looking at 7, 8, 9. But 7, I mean, again, you look at these numbers and they all just look like they're solid numbers, right? But you may have heard, well, I thought you said 7.8. That's true. Remember, not every single number is just one size fits all. There's a whole range in between that's measured with it. And when you get to 7, you're looking at a major issue here, the potential for millions to billions in dollars worth of damage, and the potential there for loss of life. Then you get to an 8, which I'd say 7.8 is pretty close to that number. Again, you're looking at severe damage and potential for incredible loss of life, usually about, on average, 1 a year. That's the thing with this. Remember, a lot of these are averages because you look at the numbers over the course of decades and you have to try and see how often do these happen, or how often do they not occur. But as you go along the scale, that's what you're actually having to deal with there all the way through. What happened in Turkey and along that border with Syria, again, was the 7.8. You're looking at as close to that 8, almost as close to that 8 as we can get. There are a lot of issues that go along with that. And what's really nice is that while that's the most basic breakdown, we're actually going to be able to take a deeper dive into this and really look at, all right, so we've got the numbers, we've got the bases. What does that mean what does that mean now for people on the ground?
Right.
And what does that mean for what comes next? We're going to have actually some people to talk to us.
Yes, very excited for these guests who are going to join us in just a couple minutes. When we return, we have two experts from Wayne State who are really going to help us understand the impact of a major earthquake like this. Stay with us.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Macomb County. Hi, we're CBS News Detroit. But we don't just cover the news here. We're also here, and everywhere in between. You know, the places you live, work, and play in Southeast Michigan. We're talking less of this, and more of the stories that actually matter to you.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock.
That's right. Local news just found a home in your neighborhood. We're CBS News Detroit. Live, streaming, and on demand. Nice to meet you. CBS News Detroit. On your block, around the clock in Wayne County. CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Monroe County.
CBS News Detroit, the stories you care about.
Live, streaming, and on demand. We're on your block, around the clock.
Southeast Michigan news whenever you want it.
We live here. We work here.
From North Branch to Southgate.
East Point to Westland.
Wherever you live, we're here for you.
Making a difference in your neighborhood.
CBS News Detroit, live, streaming, and on demand. Building a better newscast, one story at a time.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Oakland County.
How would you build the newscast of the future?
Expect the unexpected.
CBS News Detroit.
CBS News Detroit.
Southeast Michigan news whenever you want it.
We're ready to go live from your community.
Anywhere, anytime.
Live streaming and on demand.
That's the name of the game.
We are ready. CBS News Detroit, in your neighborhood. Live, streaming, and on demand. Welcome back. To give us some context now and help us better understand the earthquake's impact, we are joined by Scott Burdick, Assistant Professor of Geology and Expert Seismologist at Wayne State University, as well as Mark Baskaran, a Professor and Chair of the Department of Environmental Science and Geology, also at Wayne State. Thank you both for being here and helping to provide this context. It's really important with this story. For those of you who are just joining us on the stream, prior to the break, Ahmed gave us a breakdown, sort of a refresher for what many of us, we haven't thought about these things in years.
And I asked them both to make sure that I did all right. How'd I do?
Did they approve?
You did quite well. Yeah. We're here to fact check you.
Okay, good, perfect.
Perfect.
So we went over the Richter scale, yes, exactly what those magnitude numbers mean, and we want to talk more about the impact now. But before, let's give the viewers an idea of the difference in your expertise. We've got a meteorologist. We know there's such things as climatologists. We've got geologists, seismologists. So what is the difference in what each of you studies? Start with you, Scott.
I'm a seismologist, so I study earthquakes. For me, the most interesting thing is using data from earthquakes, the waves that travel into the earth, to understand what's deep inside. The mantle, the core. An earthquake like the one that happened in Turkey will be felt all around the world. Waves will travel many times around the entire Earth and can be measured at seismometers stationed around the planet.
And we have a seismometer in Ann Arbor as well. Is there more throughout Southeast Michigan?
Not too many more. Southeast Michigan is a relatively stable part of the country. So there's not too much additional that we can learn by having multiple closely placed seismometers.
Sure. Now, how about a geologist?
My research area is geochemistry, applications of isotopes to date to determine the age of rocks and minerals, and also identify sources, fate, and transport of contaminant using isotopes. I'm intrigued by this particular earthquake because I was in Turkey in 2015 as a Fulbright scholar, and I have seen many destruction of old buildings going back to several hundred and thousand plus years. In particular, in the scripture, there is 7 churches, and it's given in the first chapter 2 and 3 of the last book of the Bible, Revelation, where it talks about the 7 churches. One is in Izmir, and of those 7, we don't see any remnant of this. Only there are some remnants of 2 churches. So this is of great significance to the Turkey because the first century Christianity was thriving in Turkey. In fact, Jesus' mother was buried after death of Jesus. She went with the Apostle John. So there is a long Christian legacy in Turkey. So it's very interesting place.
And it kind of speaks like what you were just saying, where you only were able to see remnants of just a couple of those in the area, and it kind of speaks to potentially the activity that's going on there.
Exactly. The one in Izmir, the 3rd largest city in Turkey, where we find these humongous pillars, and we only can see it because there is no other remnant. There is one church of Ephesus, which is not far away from Izmir, maybe about 60-70 miles. We have a church where Apostle John, he lived and died there. The only one person of the 12 apostles who was not martyred. So he was the only one who lived full age and died there.
So we know certain areas of the world are more prone to earthquakes, Turkey being one of them.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the why. For those of us who don't recall, exactly what is happening beneath the surface of the earth to cause such a destructive earthquake?
So most of the major earthquakes on Earth are going to happen around tectonic plate boundaries. So tectonic plates are relatively rigid pieces of the Earth's crust and mantle that move around the surface. And these are coming into contact with each other all the time. They can spread apart, they can push together, and they can slide past each other, which is what is happening at this location in Turkey.
Yeah, Ahmed actually earlier in the office kind of told me, and he used that exact same sort of hand. There's a lot of
That's
this.
the
strike slip is the
strike
name for
slip,
it, right?
exactly.
So these are the different types of, and they would have a different impact on the world, correct?
Right, and that's
right.
correct me if I'm wrong. I have made sure I took a couple of notes with it. You've got 3 main ones that we talk about when it comes along those faults, right? You have strike slip, you have normal and reverse.
Normal and reverse, that's right.
So do you mind giving kind of a description of how each one of those works?
So a normal fault is going to happen when 2 plates or 2 sides of a fault are slipping apart. You'll have motion that's moving one plate down over the other. It feels like the normal way that something would work with gravity, right? A reverse fault, that top plate is going to go the other way, the top side of the fault. And those will typically go to build mountain ranges and can be particularly devastating, especially in the ocean where they can result in tsunamis.
And by building mountain ranges, you mean, if you're looking at the Earth from, a satellite view or from the sky, and you can see the ridge of a mountain.
That's right.
Those are the edges of the plates having pushed up?
Well, it's certainly related to that.
Okay.
But if you look at a topography map of Asia and Europe, you'll notice that there's a long chain of mountain ranges and hills and other deformation, we would say, extending from the Himalaya all the way to the Alps in Europe. And this is because that entire region is in or around the boundaries between these plates.
Yeah.
And looking at the numbers with this, with the way that it, I mean, came about, you're looking at obviously one much stronger than the other, but I mean a 7.8 and then a 7.6 in a very short period of time. How often, I mean, I'm assuming it's very rare, A, to get one of those, but even more to get two of those in such a short period of time.
Oh, they're certainly related. So along this fault, a 7.8 is a particularly large earthquake. You know, it has very frequent activity on it, but it's been a long time since Turkey has had an earthquake of this size overall, let alone on this particular fault called the East Anatolian Fault. So once an earthquake occurs on a fault like this, it will kind of transfer some of that stress that's released by the earthquake to another part of the fault. So this is typically why you'll see a series of aftershocks after a large earthquake.
How long normally do aftershocks like this continue after something this large? Are you talking days or are we talking weeks?
This will, I believe, continue for days and weeks, but the earthquakes occurring will typically get smaller and smaller at a reliable rate.
You mentioned earlier, Ahmed, you know, in some of the earthquake-prone places, the infrastructure is really built up to withstand this kind of destruction. But you have been, Mark, to Syria, to Turkey rather, in 2015, so not long ago, and you were seeing damage there from previous earthquakes long ago. How would you describe what you saw and just the impact of all that damage there?
The impact that took place is much, much older, but the country has come that a lot of preventive measures, you know, the construction code, building codes, all those are established to that can survive major earthquakes. With all that, this area, if you see the population is thinly populated area. If it has happened in place like Istanbul or Izmir or the capital Ankara, it would have been much, much worse.
Is that also because there's so much older infrastructure in these spots than when, like what you said, that there's trying to build things back up?
That's one possibility, yeah, because these infrastructure, the buildings are much older. And there's no way to predict which exact point this earthquake is going to take place. So, but in new construction that is going on for the last few decades, they have incorporated into the building codes and yeah.
I'm sure that will have to continue.
Yep. Yeah. And on the screen actually right now, we've got a little bit of the video of some of the damage that is out there. I mean, we're talking entire apartment towers that collapse in something like this. Do you kind of describe the motion that would really do the damage to be able to bring something like that down? I mean, is it just simple shaking, or is there something that goes along with that really makes these earthquakes so dangerous?
So the most dangerous part of the earthquake are the large, more powerful surface waves. These are waves that travel along a surface, which can be considerably more powerful than the first arriving body waves.
Is that what a P wave? Is that what that is?
A P wave, very good. A P wave is a body wave that travels into the earth and back up. Those are going to typically be a lot smaller.
And what does that look like? A wave, you said surface level, like visibly, are we seeing the surface of the earth?
In this case, you would see probably visible motion when you're close into this fault. So these surface waves will shake the ground side to side in this sort of a motion. And this is what causes a lot of the damage.
Yeah.
Buildings are pretty good at withstanding up and down motion. They have to be to stand up in gravity, right?
Sure.
But they're not really very good at going side to side, which is typically what's going to cause collapse.
Well, we know that extreme weather events are increasing in frequency due to climate change. Does climate change have any impact on earthquakes?
Not a very strong one, if any, no.
So is that there's no way to really prevent an earthquake necessarily? Is this just the way it is on Earth for the future?
Yeah, you know, efforts have been made to predict earthquakes. It's an extremely difficult task. Nobody's cracked the code on that one yet, as far as I've seen.
It seems like every time you get one of these big ones that happens, which, I mean, they're awful every single time they do, but all of a sudden something crops up online about, hey, look, we know how to predict it, or we know how to maybe prevent it, and every single time these things get debunked. I mean, there really is no good way to figure out when something like this could occur.
The climate change that we are witnessing is because it is taking place above the Earth's surface. The increase in temperature, increase in carbon dioxide, etc. But the earthquake is what is happening inside. It is more like a pressure cooker. We cook something and the pressure builds up. Once the pressure reaches a threshold, the vent pops up, the pressure is released. This exactly happens in the case of earthquake. Inside, there is a lot of heating, constant heating is going on, and that heating, results in gases building up pressure. So once in a while, when there is a fracture through which it vents out, and then it subsides next to few, several years, we don't have anything. So this constant pressure building inside, venting out is basically earthquake.
So once that energy is released, does that tell us anything? Is there any reason to assume there would not be another earthquake in that exact same spot, or are all bets off even for that?
Well, a lot of faults have repeating earthquakes where the same patch breaks and ruptures again and again. I don't honestly know about this particular fault, but something like the San Andreas will see an earthquake roughly every 150 years along certain parts of it. And this is because the stress, the energy that's placed on these faults is from these large-scale motions of plates.
Right.
And so it releases some of that tension, but it keeps trying to push the two past each other.
So
which
outside
loads
of
it up again.
Outside of aftershocks, though, would it seem pretty unlikely for another major earthquake to hit there at the border of Turkey and Syria?
I couldn't say for sure.
One can't say.
I would predict that they will continue to see their share of seismic activity there.
Yeah, we certainly hope not. No time soon.
Right.
Unfortunately.
And there was a number that came across from the USGS just a little bit earlier today talking about the rupture along that line, or the fissured area that they're estimating it's around the upper 300 to 400 kilometer length.
Yeah.
And I mean, that seems like a significant size, just, from just glancing at it. Is that something, is the size of that type of a rupture something that just goes along with the magnitude of the earthquake, or is it something that goes along with the type of the, basically, attack that we're dealing with?
That's right. So the size of the rupture, the area of the Earth that moves in this earthquake is going to be responsible for how much energy is released. And it's going to be responsible for how much shaking occurs, which gives us the magnitude. An earthquake of this side is, it's likely to rupture something on the order of 100 to I think I saw 250 kilometers in length, or some number of miles.
Yeah.
Trying to do the conversion
that metric system.
very, very
160
quickly.
or so. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough area, especially to have to deal with something like that. And it's not obviously right along the water. And one of the main things that you've studied, of course, is a lot of just really kind of micro movement within that upper portion of the mantle, correct? And how that maybe interacts. Is this something that kind of ties into that research?
Absolutely. So the mantle, the overturning of the mantle very slowly. It's solid rock, but it flows like a very, very, very slow liquid, I guess you could say. And it's this flow within the mantle that's actually what is responsible for pushing and pulling on these plates. And so, by understanding what the mantle looks like, we can see where the plates were moving up to about 300 million years ago.
Wow.
And kind of track what's happened and where the earthquakes used to be, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, finally, Mark, having been to Turkey, once you saw the news of this earthquake, what was going through your mind?
I was thinking, once again, there is nothing human beings can do to control it. For example, in the 1970s, in China, when there was a major earthquake, they predicted and say they took all the precaution. Next year they had another major earthquake. They didn't know it's coming. So the earthquake prediction has not tremendously improved. Although the research people are doing research over the last 40, 50 years with the different kinds of tools, including the noble gas radon. They see suddenly, because if the crack opens up, through which some of the noble gases can suddenly increase, or because of the cracks, the groundwater in that area, suddenly the concentration of these noble gases increases. The solubility of some noble gases increases. So they have done all these kinds of things and then monitored when suddenly the groundwater level, radon concentration, groundwater level goes up, it triggers, and then the warning signal comes. But still it is not 100%, foolproof. There is always an uncertainty, and that's why we are struggling, that we are unable to predict with 80, 90% certainty saying that this earthquake is going to take place in the next 2 weeks or 1 week, so that people can move on to save their lives.
Yeah.
Is this something that actually even has a chance to potentially be improved on? Like a prediction for something like this? I know there's continued research, but it seems like something that's just so. I mean,
are you seeing anything
coming from a
promising
meteorologist?
enough?
Coming from a meteorologist saying unpredictable, but how far do you think we'd be able to get to eventually start nailing these down?
The approach that Mark mentions, I think, is pretty promising. Looking for these small signs ahead of time can really be helpful as we understand more and more about the processes that lead to earthquakes. The difficulty that we still face is that even if we can tell which part of the fault is likely to rupture and cause an earthquake, it's still very hard to tell how much of it will go, and that is going to make it hard to tell how big these earthquakes will be. Right. So we might predict the big one and end up with a small one, I suppose.
Yeah, still much to be learned, but hopefully there are some advances there soon to prevent the kind of tragedy we're seeing overseas. Mark and Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your expertise, and I hope you'll join us again sometime.
Sure.